Good morning, everyone. Here to the Digital Media Hub here at the Vienna International Center. Welcome to the global launch of the 2024 Annual Report and Precursors Report of the International Narcotics Control Board, short INCB. I'm Christine Dirk from the UN Information Service in Vienna. We are pleased to welcome journalists joining us here in the room and those watching the live stream on UN Web TV. I'm joined here by the President of the International Narcotics Control Board, Jalal Toufic, who will be presenting the report to you this morning. After the presentation, there will be an opportunity for journalists in the room to ask questions, and journalists watching on UN Web TV who watch the live stream can send a written request to the following email: press.vienna@un.org. I'll repeat, press.vienna@un.org. I would now like to hand over to the President to present the report. Mr. Toufic, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Christine. Thank you so much. It's an honor and a pleasure to welcome you to the launch of the 2024 Annual Report of the International Narcotics Control Board for 2024. INCB's annual report presents an overview of the global drug control situation and makes recommendations to governments and international and regional organizations on how to better implement the provisions of the treaties. The INCB Precursors report summarizes the action taken by governments and INCB to prevent the diversion of chemicals to illicit drug production and to implement the provisions of the 1988 Convention against illicit traffic in narcotic drugs and psychotropic substances. The thematic chapter of 2024 annual report focuses on possible responses to the rapid expansion of the illicit synthetic drug industry. Non-medical synthetic drug use and related drug use disorders have quickly become a deadly problem, resulting in thousands of deaths annually. The proliferation of new psychoactive substances, including non-medical synthetic opioids, provides illicit actors with virtually limitless ways to fundamentally reshape drug markets. The challenge is characterized by the emergence of designer precursors and pre-precursors for the manufacture of non-controlled new psychoactive substances. For criminal actors, manufacturing synthetic drugs has some advantages over plant-based drug cultivation and trafficking. Synthetic drugs can be readily manufactured with little technical or scientific expertise required and reduced labor and operational costs compared with plant-based drugs, which require extensive acreage and human resources for planting, harvesting, and processing, and are vulnerable to weather conditions, satellite detection, and forced eradication. Synthetic drugs can be illicitly manufactured in small makeshift facilities that are difficult for law enforcement authorities to detect, or industrial-grade facilities for large-scale manufacture. These manufacturing facilities can be located anywhere and are often placed closer to transit and destination markets. Synthetic drugs are being designed to mimic the effects of plant-based drugs, but are significantly more potent. The inclusion of fentanyl, carfentanil, or narizines increases potency often to fatal levels. With an increased potency to weight ratio, smaller volumes are trafficked and are harder to detect. While the global illicit demand for plant-based drugs still exceeds the current supply of synthetic substances, seizures have begun to outpace some of the plant-based drugs. Traffickers can rapidly shift between different precursors materials and alternate between finished synthetic drugs, as you can see on the slide. This data communicated through INCB Precursors Incident Communication Systems, known as PICS, illustrates how illicit producers shifted between different precursors to manufacture amphetamines. The great strategic intelligence visualization of ionic certifications shows how traffickers alternate between one finished drug, such as tramadol, and another, such as tapentadol, within a matter of just months. The chapter explores emerging regional threats and possible scenarios. In North America, carfentanil, fentanyl, and nitazines pose some of the greatest, most immediate risks to public health, but also threaten new regions. A second scenario looks at the expansion of amphetamine-type stimulant manufacture and trafficking, highlighting risks in Africa and the Middle East, where treatment and rehabilitation resources are already very limited. Trafficking to markets in Southern, East, and West Africa is still increasing, and in Southeast Asia, methamphetamine production increased in the Golden Triangle cross-border area. The third scenario considers the impact of the Taliban ban on opium poppy, which increased the reliance of drug producers on manufacturing processes in Afghanistan for methamphetamine, and which may prompt an increase in methamphetamine processing and trafficking in neighboring border areas. In Europe, a looming deficit in heroin supply will likely create greater space for the synthetic drugs market to expand, and traffickers have already begun to introduce alternative synthetic opioids to European markets. Across Africa, there has been a proliferation of falsified pharmaceutical synthetic drugs and an increase in their non-medical use. The expansion of tramadol use in West, Central, and North Africa poses serious risks to local public health sectors that are ill-equipped to deal with growing demand for rehabilitation or harm reduction measures. Kush will likely strengthen its foothold in Africa. Nitazines are already found in a significant proportion of samples of Kush in some African countries. Illicit ketamine manufacture and trafficking has steadily increased in East and Southeast Asia, and there has been a parallel rise in North American and European markets. This grids intelligence HD data and timeline of ionic certifications show the steady rise in ketamine seizures in 2023, with many consignments routed through Europe. Under the International Drug Control Framework formed by the International Drug Control Conventions, the United Nations and member states have cooperated to adopt multilateral strategies, early warning and prevention systems, and science-informed health responses, and to increase the capacity to disrupt illicit drug and precursor trafficking. Through its Precursor Control Program and GRIDS program, INCB is supporting governments to address the challenges posed by the expansion of the illicit market for synthetic drugs. In response to the increasing manufacture and trafficking in precursors and pre-precursors, the INCB Precursors Task Force has developed a series of initiatives to gather intelligence and identify capacity gaps in precursor control. The INCB pre-export notification system, known as PEN Online, allows exporting and importing governments to ascertain the legitimacy of suspicious consignments transporting controlled precursor materials. The INCB PEN Online Lite system enables member states to voluntarily exchange pre-export notifications on non-controlled chemicals. The INCB Precursors Incident Communication System, PICS, enables governments to exchange actionable intelligence on trafficking and diversion of precursors and associated illegal activities. The INCB GRIDS program has developed a suite of tools for the exchange of actionable intelligence between relevant law enforcement and regulatory agencies on synthetic drugs. The Project ION Incident Communication System enables the exchange of information on trafficking and illicit manufacture of new psychoactive substances. Other IONIX tools provide for strategic risk profiling, operational visualization, and training. The INCB GRIDS program has enabled the formation of public-private partnerships and the voluntary exchange of expertise to dismantle synthetic drug marketplaces and trafficking organizations. However, there is a need to bridge the gap between high-income and low- and middle-income countries when it comes to the capacity of law enforcement and public health responses. Chemical analysis of the growing range of synthetic drugs represents a significant challenge for low- and middle-income countries. The greatest deficit among low- and middle-income countries, however, is in demand reduction and treatment services. Programs to reverse synthetic drug-related overdoses also pose challenges in developing countries. There needs to be a coordinated framework with a balanced approach towards both the demand and supply reduction. The international community should begin to construct a comprehensive, coordinated strategy. Governments and international organizations should prepare for the increased presence of synthetic drugs in local and regional markets by identifying key blind spots that traffickers may exploit. To augment interdiction and security programs, now it is the time to make greater investments in evidence-based and stigma-free education, treatment, and prevention strategies. INCB data reconfirms the persistent inequities in access to opioid-based pain medicines, with almost all consumption concentrated in Western Europe, North America, and Oceania. Levels of consumption in other regions are insufficient to adequately meet the medical needs of the populations. In 2023, there was of particular concern in East and Southeast Asia, Central America, and the Caribbean, South Asia, and Africa. These regional imbalances are not due to any shortages of raw materials, with global supply more than sufficient to meet the demand reported by INCB by governments. However, the estimated requirements for several countries may not accurately reflect actual medical needs. INCB urges opioid manufacturing countries to increase the manufacture of morphine preparations for use in pain management and palliative care, and also to make them more broadly available and more affordable, in particular in low and middle income countries. Another factor contributing to inadequate availability for medical purposes is that more than 80% of the morphine manufactured is utilized for the manufacture of other substances, such as codeine, as shown on the slide of INCB data on morphine utilization. This is explored in detail in the first of the selected global issues covered in the report. The second issue reviews the availability of controlled substances for the treatment of opioid use disorder. An estimated 10% of people with opioid use disorder have access to opioid agonist therapy. In some countries with a high prevalence of people who inject drugs and opioid use disorder, consumption of methadone and buprenorphine and availability of opioid agonist therapy services are limited to non-existent. In view of the increase in non-medical use of opioids and the associated health and social consequences, INCB encourages countries to develop programs and services to address the problem, including use of controlled substances such as methadone and buprenorphine for treatment and opioid agonist therapies services. The next global issue focuses on the importance of the rational use of psychotropic substances controlled under the 1971 Convention on Psychotropic Substances, which play a crucial role in managing various mental health and neurological conditions, including ADHD, anxiety disorders, narcolepsy, epilepsy, and sleep disorders. The next global issue focuses on challenges in ensuring access to internationally controlled substances for medical purposes during humanitarian emergencies caused by armed conflict. INCB is raising awareness about special procedures provided for in the drug control conventions to allow for the expedited movement of controlled substances for medical use during emergencies. INCB calls upon states exercising effective control of foreign territories in the context of armed conflict to take urgent action to ensure unimpeded access to medications, including those containing internationally controlled narcotics drugs and psychotropic substances. INCB also calls upon such states to continue to provide access to controlled substances for opioid agonist therapy if such treatment was provided prior to the occupation. A set of global issues are aimed at assisting member states in developing a better understanding of the challenges faced by law enforcement authorities in countering dynamic illicit synthetic drug market by focusing on innovative approaches to the surveillance of chemical precursors through emerging technologies, counterintelligence techniques employed by drug traffickers, and the use of remotely piloted aircraft systems in drug trafficking. We highlight the importance of using secure, real-time communication channels to coordinate law enforcement and regulatory responses, public-private partnerships with private logistics companies, and advanced technologies such as chemical detectors, X-ray scanners, and electronic surveillance tools. A final global issue looks at the problem of falsified pharmaceutical containing internationally controlled substances or new psychoactive substances, in particular contamination with potent opioids such as fentanyl or designer benzodiazepines. This is particularly problematic in Africa, where an estimated 22.6% of medicines are falsified, substandard, or unregistered. In June 2024, the INCB GRIDS program facilitated Operation African Star, focusing on pharmaceutical trafficking in East Africa, which resulted in 92 seizures of pharmaceutical products. Targeting falsified benzodiazepines, Operation Zodiac, held globally under the INCB GRIDS program, led to 460 seizures of benzodiazepines. Misuse of veterinary products has increased, as has the illicit manufacture of substances such as ketamine, medetomidine, and xylazine. Africa continues to be seriously affected by large-scale drug trafficking, with significant seizures of cocaine and other drugs in the Sahel. There is growing evidence of an increase in the use of cocaine and its associated harms in African countries, probably spillover effect from the use of Africa as a transit region for cocaine trafficking to Europe. European Union member states reported the seizure of a record amount of cocaine for the 6th year in a row. In Peru, the reported area of illicit coca bush cultivation decreased for the first time in 8 years. Illicit coca bush cultivation in Colombia reached a new all-time high in 2023. Drug trafficking and the resultant decline in public safety are hindering development in Central America and the Caribbean. And the opioid crisis remains a serious challenge for countries in North America. The illicit synthetic drug market in East and Southeast Asia continues to grow at a concerning rate. South Asia continues to be the region with the lowest levels of illicit consumption of opioid analgesics in the world. Availability of narcotic drugs and psychotropic substances is insufficient in some South Asian countries. Illicit opium poppy cultivation in Afghanistan increased in 2024, but was still significantly lower than the levels prior to the drug ban announced by de facto authorities back in 2022. The manufacture, trafficking, and consumption of amphetamine-type stimulants is accelerating in the Middle East and Africa. Large-scale shipments of cocaine and methamphetamine continue to be trafficked through the Pacific Island states to Australia and New Zealand. Drug use in Pacific Island states was reported to be increasing and pose a challenge owing to the very limited capacity for prevention and treatment. I have already covered many of INCB's recommendations to governments and international regional organizations in my presentation. However, I would like to briefly emphasize some recommendations that I have not yet touched upon. INCB reiterates that measures legalizing the non-medical use of internationally controlled substances, for example, cannabis, are contrary to the provisions of the International Drug Control Conventions. On human rights, INCB urges governments to give due consideration to the right to health, including availability of controlled medicines, also in emergency situations, the right to access to evidence-based prevention, treatment, rehabilitation, and social reintegration services that are free of stigma, and the principle of proportionality in criminal justice responses to drug-related offenses as prescribed in the conventions. Let me now turn to INCB's precursors report for 2024, which provides an update of the world situation regarding precursor chemicals and equipment used in illicit drug manufacture, and which describes the action taken by governments and INCB to implement the 1988 Convention, mainly Article 12 on precursors, but also Article 13 on materials, including non-scheduled chemicals and equipment. The report was drafted based on treaty-based data reported by governments to INCB and data from the INCB electronic platform to monitor the international illicit trade in scheduled precursors PEN Online and non-scheduled chemicals, PEN Online Lite, and to exchange information on seizures and other incidents related to illicit drug manufacture through PICS. Effective as of December 2024, 18 new drug precursors are under international control. 2 fentanyl precursors and 2 series of closely related amphetamine-type stimulant precursors. These scheduling decisions were taken by the Commission on Narcotic Drugs upon the recommendation of INCB. The global quantity of ephedrins, which is a precursor of amphetamine-type stimulant, seized in 2023 surpassed the quantities seized in the previous 2 years combined. We saw the first reports to INCB of seizures of fentanyl precursors in Europe. We also saw for the first time the illicit manufacture of a designer precursor in a clandestine laboratory in South Africa. First-time seizures of precursors of synthetic cannabinoids and proliferation of methods of illicit methamphetamine manufacture known to be used from Mexico to South Asia and Southern Asia. Trafficking in acetic anhydride heroin precursor destined for Afghanistan continues, although on a smaller scale. Regarding cocaine precursors, seized potassium permanganate has predominantly been sourced from within the country in which the seizures have been made. In response to the surge in seizures of ephedrins, INCB carried out Operation Pseudonym in 2024, focusing on international and, where possible, domestic trade in ephedrine and pseudoephedrine. To assist governments in addressing the proliferation of non-scheduled chemicals and designer precursors, INCB disseminated to all competent national authorities updated information on alternative chemicals that could be used for illicit purposes, as well as compendium on national control measures. INCB initiated the development of a tool to monitor the online e-commerce platforms on the surface web for suspicious postings involving precursor chemicals and equipment used in illicit drug manufacture as an input for intelligence packages and trend analyses. INCB is collaborating with subchapter of the International Association of Judges on emerging challenges to the successful adjudication of precursor-related offenses. We encourage governments to make better use of INCB's information sharing tools. This includes the Precursor Incident Communication System, PICS, for the timely sharing for actionable information in support of precursor and equipment investigations, and PEN Online and PEN Online Lite for the exchange of information on legitimate international trade. A proactive approach to countering illicit drug manufacturing requires the active engagement of industries which may be unwittingly exploited by drug traffickers who divert chemicals and equipment into the illicit manufacture. INCB is helping governments in creating an environment where public and private actors can cooperate. Illicit manufacture of drugs, particularly synthetic drugs, requires chemicals as well as specialized equipment such as pill pressing machines and glassware. INCB endorsed a strategic approach to equipment, held the 4th expert group meeting on equipment, and continued work with the World Customs Organization on establishing unique tariff codes for selected equipment. We encourage governments to implement measures to prevent trade in and diversion of equipment for the illicit manufacture of drugs. Other recommendations made in the precursors report include controlling pharmaceutical preparations containing substances in Table 1 and 2 of the 1988 Convention in the same way as the substances themselves. Monitoring domestic manufacturers of pharmaceutical preparations of ephedrine and pseudoephedrine to prevent the manufacture of fake medicines. Conducting investigations into suspicious transactions, including those on the surface internet. conducting investigations into precursor seizures and forensic profiling analysis of seized substances to determine the nature of starting materials, exercising vigilance about quantities indicated as being required by companies when determining annual legitimate requirements pursuant to CND Resolution 49.3. Having just covered in some detail the work of the INCB Precursors Control Program, as presented in the 2024 Precursors Report, I will briefly present some highlights of the work of the INCB Learning and GRITS programs before concluding my presentation. INCB Learning is enhancing the ability of governments to estimate the requirements for internationally controlled substances for medical and scientific purposes in compliance with the three international drug control treaties, with the aim of promoting adequate availability of narcotic drugs and psychotropic substances for medical and scientific purposes, while preventing their misuse. The initiative includes 5 modules for online learning in English, French, Russian, and Spanish, as well as Portuguese, as well as virtual and in-person training and seminars. As of November 1st, 2024, 1,502 officials from 154 countries and territories have enrolled in INCB Learning modules. The INCB GRITS program focal point network enables the rapid exchange of information on alerts, on the development of intelligence, which facilitates operational action to assist in investigations and the dismantling of organized criminal groups trafficking in non-scheduled dangerous substances, such as new psychoactive substances and non-medical synthetic opioids. With an expanding network of focal points, the number of real-time incidents communicated through the INCB Ionics platform has consistently grown over the years, surpassing 100,000 exchanges as of 2024. Consequently, over 10 years of operation, governments have been able to carry out investigations and analyses that have in turn led to seizures of dangerous substances, arrests of traffickers, prosecutions, and disruptions of international trafficking networks. I have already mentioned Operation Zodiac and African Star, which were held under the GRITS program and which resulted in 465 seizures amounting to 286,000 tablets, as well as 30 kilograms and 300 ml of seized benzodiazepines across Africa, and over 115,000 units and 1.15 kilogram of unauthorized, falsified, substandard, or illicitly manufactured pharmaceutical totaling in East Africa. In the past year, 7 global alerts and special notices were circulated to Project ION and Opioids Project focal points for voluntary action by law, regulatory, and private sector counterparts. 1 special alert related to global trafficking in ketamine, and 4 special notices addressed the increasing prevalence of synthetic opioids marketed as Kush in West Africa, strengthened regulations on veterinary medicines in China, new controls over 46 psychoactive substances and synthetic opioids in China, and reports of 2 emerging veterinary medicine being detected in North America. Over the past year, 42 training events were held through the GRITS program for more than 900 law and regulatory enforcement officers and postal inspection officers from 80 governments and 7 international organizations. In conclusion, I would like to leave you with 3 key takeaways from the 2024 reports. Firstly, the rapid proliferation of highly potent synthetic drugs is a major threat to public health. The INCB GRITS and precursor control programs are supporting governments, and INCB is calling for a comprehensive, coordinated strategy to address illicit manufacture, trafficking, and consumption of synthetic drugs. Secondly, cocaine production, trafficking, and use remains a concern, with a record amounts seized in European Union member states and increased use in Africa as a possible spillover effect of cocaine trafficking. Record levels of illicit coca bush cultivation were recorded in Colombia in 2023 and Peru in 2022. Thirdly, INCB data reconfirms the persistent inequities in availability of internationally controlled medicines. INCB is calling for an increase in the manufacture of affordable morphine and reminding governments about the possibility of applying simplified procedures to ensure access during humanitarian emergencies. This brings my presentation to a close. I look forward to taking your questions, and thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, for your presentation. I would now like to open the floor for questions. We have a microphone here in the room that will be handed to you. If you could please identify yourself with your name and media accreditation, and with your media organization when you have a question. That'd be appreciated. There's one right over there. Right over there, this gentleman.
Hi, Stephen Hoff. Stephen Hoff, CBC. So 2 questions. First is, what's the impact of the withdrawal of U.S. funding going to be on the International Narcotics Control Board going forward? And the second question is directly related to Canada and tariffs, but what are the primary channels of fentanyl entering the U.S. According to the board this year?
Thank you very much for the first question. I only God knows. I mean, who knows what the U.S. withdrawal impact would be. I'm not in a position to really give a comprehensive answer to that. And the second question is about Canada and trafficking.
What's the primary import source for fentanyl moving into the U.S. according to the board?
To the U.S. from
anywhere. Like, what's the major source country? Because they're blaming Canada and Mexico, and I'm wondering if the board can quantify that in some way, or has found that to be true.
I think the UNODC may be better tool to answer this question. I think the UNODC has more data on the routes of trafficking into different countries.
Understood.
Thank you.
Is there another question? Over here in the front, ORF, please.
Peter Fritz, Austrian Television, ORF. Sir, you mentioned record amounts of seizures of cocaine in Europe. You also mentioned that growth has been hampered of heroin in Afghanistan. But would that mean, with the increasing compensation through synthetic drugs, that Europe now has an all-time high both ways on naturally grown and synthetic drugs?
Are you talking about the synthetic drugs or cocaine?
Both of them. Do we see a simultaneous all-time high in consumption of natural and...
On the consumption or on the trafficking?
Yeah, both, I think.
On consumption, I don't have the real, data on consumption. I think maybe the European Drug Agency would have better figures on that, and actually updated ones. But what we can tell you is that, in fact, we have both simultaneously cocaine increasing and synthetic drugs increasing. And the problem is we have high records of production of cocaine worldwide going through Africa, and from Africa going through Europe, and also directly from Latin America to Europe. And that poses 2 challenges. The first one is, of course, having increased amount of cocaine getting into Europe. But the second one is, while going through Africa, some of it stays in Africa. And I think that's one of the most challenges that we're facing now, is the increase of cocaine also in Africa. The second thing with synthetic drugs is, let me just be clear on this, because we're still not realizing the danger worldwide of synthetic drugs coming into the markets. The problem is we're dealing with something that's very, very easy to produce, very easy to design, very easy to conceal, and very easy to traffic. And substances that are really highly potent, very addictive, and deadly. And you can easily imagine that the synthetic drugs are one of these days will most likely surpass all the other uses worldwide and with the deadly consequences that and also the bad consequences on health that could be that they could have. I mean, I can imagine that this is something we need to be really very aware of, and also if we are aware enough, we should work together. And this is where multilateralism needs to stay and remain the key response to the situation. No country alone can handle the problem of synthetic drugs. No country alone on this planet can handle the problem of synthetic drugs. So the reason is you have in countries that produce, that manufacture, and you have in countries of transit, and you have in countries that are really the main target for the markets and for the traffickers. And without the cooperation between those countries, the whole world, I would say, you can't solve this problem. And also, there's also another issue, which is regulations and the means of control of those substances. We're chasing something we may never catch, and the reason is, I'm talking under the control of my colleagues at the INCB at the precursor section, is that we're coming up with new precursors and precursors every single day that are not necessarily under international control. They're often not under international control to design and create those new psychoactive substances. So the pace of passing laws and putting in place control measures has nothing to do with the pace of production and trafficking and of course selling. And if you add to this the health response, which is really poor in many regions of the world. First of all, we don't even know what's in those substances most of the time. We don't know exactly what are the effects, so we're lacking clinical knowledge about the ER response to those, and we're lacking trainings in many countries, and we're lacking services and treatment services in the first place in many countries.
Thank you, sir.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Next question.
Hi, from EFE, Spanish agency. I have like 3 questions. First, do you think the tariffs imposed by USA to China, Canada, and Mexico can help to stop the fentanyl crisis? And also, what do you think about the fact that the USA government has declared some cartels as terrorist organizations? Do you think it could help in fighting with drug trafficking? And also, the last question is about Syria. Like, there's new government in Syria, and the INCB has been in contact with the government, as far as we know. So, if you know there any changes in the fight to address the problem of Captagon, if there's been any change on how to address the problem.
Again, for the I can't comment as the president of INCB on tariffs. That are imposed by the U.S. too. Now, common sense would say that traffickers always find a way around everything you would impose. So again, tariffs are of course aiming regular commerce, right? We're talking here about illicit commerce and illicit trafficking. I'm not sure what are the consequences. No one, I think, would know in advance what would be the consequences on tariffs on commerce, on illicit market and illicit trafficking and illicit production, and no one would know. Let's wait and see. Only time will tell. The second thing is on Syria. I think now that we're having a government to talk to and engage in very serious discussions, so the INCB would very likely engage in negotiations and also in discussions with the government of Syria, with the freshly, of course, appointed government of Syria, to discuss the Captagon issue. I think this is one of the main objectives of the INCB is really to get to engage in a discussion with Syria on the Cryptagon. But as you know, discussions with governments remain totally confidential.
Is there another question here in the front?
My name is Jacob Staubman. I'm from MENA Editors Network. I have two questions, actually. The first one is about, because I know that now INCB is helping governments to control the whole things, but the question is, are you using also the last technology to like using satellites, drones to recognize the fields where these plants are planted and to destroy it by laser, for example, or something like this? The second question is, do we know already as a governments that helped also some of these traffickers to are not in reality fighting against them, but they help in the background?
I get your first question, but I didn't get the second one. I'm sorry if you can just maybe
There is
reformulate.
governments known to you who are really helping instead of fighting.
Do you mean governments promoting trafficking?
Yeah, worldwide.
Okay, well,
Because there's always some black sheep.
do you really expect me to answer that question? Honestly, no. I mean, thank you for your questions. I'm sorry, but no, INCB does not control. Does not have any means of controlling cultivation, as you said, from satellite point of view. But we do have. That's not the work of the INCB. UNODC may do it. I mean, they have. They work on the areas of cultivation of illicit, of course, cultivation. But we do have, as you mentioned, state-of-the-art technology. We use state-of-the-art technology in the INCB for many reasons, and most of them is to help countries, first of all, to notify import-export, and also to notify incidents and events regarding illicit channels of trafficking, and also to report on suspicious shipments, for example. So that I really invite you one of these days, if you want. Would be very lucky to maybe give you a presentation on what we do. But it's really state-of-the-art technology that we're using. GRITS is one of them. The GRITS program is one of them. PICS also. Many other programs that we have that are our golden programs at the INCB that use really technology. Governments helping criminal organizations. I'll leave you with that question. I have no comment on that, as you would expect.
Is there another question in the room? I do have a question that was posted online from DPA, from Albert Otti, also relating to the tariffs imposed on Canada, Mexico, and China. And in your view, are general punitive tariffs an effective way, or rather, what are the effective ways to tackle cross-border trafficking?
Again, as I said, measures adopted by countries. I don't think I have a comment to make on that. Now, again, common sense. Any policy that's taken by any country needs time to be evaluated. Let's see how those tariffs would impact the traffic. That's a question mark. That's a question I would ask myself.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. If there are no more questions in the room, I finally would also like to point everyone to the Secretary General remarks on his remarks on the funding cuts. The Secretary General is deeply concerned about the information received regarding the severe cuts in funding by the United States, and these cuts impact a wide range of critical programs. The UN Office of Drugs and Crime will be forced to stop many of its counter-narcotics programs, but the Secretary General hopes that these decisions can be reversed and based on more careful review. For the full remarks by the Secretary General, please go to the UN website, and specifically the webpage for press and media, and you will find them there. Also, I would like to add that the report, the INCB report and the precursor report are available in all 6 languages, including also the press materials on the UNIS website, on our website. Dear Mr. President, I would like to thank you very much for being here today and giving your clear explanation of the report and answering the questions.
Thank you, and thank you all.
Thank you very much.